Welcome to Divisionalysis. I'm Fog. I've spent a lot of time over the last week or so just staring, pondering, looking at computer screen, pondering some more about how I'm going to crack the accuracy question. Now my research, it's put up some new questions, but I'm definitely further along and I want to share with you 7 discoveries that I've made. Let's go. Now, accuracy is commonly used in place of rounds on target. But when we're talking about accuracy as an attribute, it's something completely different. It is one portion to rounds on target. So I've got the AKM here, and if I fire single shots at the wall, you can see that my shots are landing exactly at the middle point of my reticle, essentially achieving 100% accuracy. Every shot landing where it was intended to go. But the variation from the center point is what we determine as accuracy. So as I fire an automatic fire, the reticle begins to bloom. And the little white dot dancing around in the center is actually where my bullets are going to go. It's a deviation from that center point, and that is what we consider the attribute of accuracy. Is how far that little white dot will deviate from where I'm actually aiming. That little white dot is a random number generator, random coordinate generator, and it will determine where the bullet will land within that accuracy window. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to equip the safety distance, an SMG, and show you what that looks like as far as bloom is concerned. So once again, I can fire single bullets, but as I do, you can see that the diameter of the aiming mark or the aiming reticle starts to widen. But what we're going to see is what the difference that the buff for the safety distance means as far as that reticle is concerned. So I'm just going to fire over here again to show you how large the difference is with the reticle. So there we are here. Now, after I kill a target, activate So I'm going to show those side by side now. And so you can see that the difference of 125% accuracy amounts to what appears to be a fairly small difference as far as bloom is concerned. Now I can show you the effect at the other end with a simple test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot from exactly the same position at this point on the wall. So that is the safety distance without its buff active. I'm going to activate its buff and fire another magazine right next to it. (125% accuracy). So discovery number 1 is return on investment. What we have here is a blow up of the safety distance bullet profiles, one on the left being without the buff, one on the right being with the buff, so an extra 125% accuracy. I've just put 10 cubes here to represent 10%, so 100% across the distance for the non-buff bullet profile, and when I give equal blocks to the with buff profile, it is 10 on the left and 7 on the right. So we have gained 30% narrowing to our accuracy profile for an investment of 125% accuracy. Roughly a 4-to-1 or a 1-to-4 return. So that means that your 10% accuracy weapon attachment is going to give you roughly 2.5% narrowing of your profile. That equates to approximately the width of the blue lines that you see. So a terrible investment. So armed with the knowledge that there wasn't much that we can do about accuracy, I wanted to set out to find what the accuracy was of each and every weapon system. So I fired 3 bursts of full magazines at the wall in the shooting range at varying distances. I then, over and over again, adjusted for what was the best line of fit for each of those shoots, adjusting each time to see if I could get the most accurate across. Sometimes it took 3 or 4 shoots against the wall, traveling to a safe house every time to refresh the wall. I made sure that I took photos from exactly the same point in the shooting range. I made sure that the aspect was always kept the same. And then I would continue this process over and over again until I felt that I had the most accurate representation of what the weapon system's weapon handling profile looked like. I would constantly refer to the further distances to make sure that the angles were right, and if there's any adjustments I would then go back. And this process would go on and on until I was able to find what the profile looked like across all distances. This led me to my second discovery. So less of a discovery and more of a confirmation, and that is that in-game physics work the same way as real-world physics, and that is that for every doubling of distance we'll see a doubling of bullet spread and also recoil as well. Here you can see a single block, when the distance is doubled, the accuracy bloom has also doubled. Same for recoil as well. Out in the real world, I took out to longer distances to also conform bullet patterns as well. Here at 40 meters, you can see the angle of incidence for the turn is exactly the same for 20 meters, is exactly the same for the other varying distances within inside the shooting range. And you can see that there is a consistent graduation across distances, and here is the smallest one, doubled now for almost double the distance. So again, armed with that knowledge, I went back to the graphing, and then I plotted the fringes of the bloom. So essentially now mapping the accuracy of that weapon, knowing that I could trust that that bloom was going to be accurate across all distances. So I plotted the center line and the bloom, and then I checked it against variations on the pattern of shot until I confirmed that I had an accurate representation of accuracy and weapon handling profiles. I then did that for every single assault rifle. I now included some of the named variants of assault rifles, as they had talents that were going to affect accuracy. And then I got to the bighorn, and it was a nightmare. It seemed like there was absolutely no pattern. This is what I resorted to, is just shooting the weapon at the wall over and over and over again to see if I could discern something from its pattern. And this was the next discovery. There is in fact a pattern. The bighorn 3-4 times during its weapon profile will take a jump. It will jump to essentially the extremity of its accuracy window and then start its natural incline again. Now sometimes that jump can be all the way to the extremity of its accuracy window, and then sometimes it'll only be halfway. makes it very hard to keep control of, because sometimes the bullet profile can actually bend in the opposite direction completely, not to mention the fact that its incline travels from left to right and then it jumps from right to left. And now what we have is a complete list of weapon handling profiles. And as I started to put these on a page, I realized, I made the discovery that there is very, very little difference between the accuracy of these weapons. The only one that stands out from this bunch is the Chameleon, which definitely has a worse accuracy profile, as in a spread from the center blue line. And you can see here the rail splitter takes its 40% accuracy with that 4-to-1 return, ends up with a 10% narrower profile than the CTAR. The next group of weapons, what you can see here is that these profiles are all very, very similar, within a few percent of each other. And that led me, when I saw this, the G36 having the worst profile, and that took me back to the stats sheets. So if I equip the G36, go in and I start comparing it to other assault rifles. Let's start with the capacitor, first one on the list. And as you can see, capacitor has a better accuracy. Chameleon, the only assault rifle that showed a worse in the results. And as we scroll through the list, yep, even worse than the AKM. The G36 is the assault rifle with the worst accuracy, excluding the Chameleon. Keep going down the list. G36 is another one, so obviously the same. But the discovery is that the accuracy stats are actually correct. Who knew? So I can equip the MK16 now. We can go back and we can see why they were so close. Here we can see, compared to the PDR, it was virtually the same. Even the M4 and the AK, we're only talking very small differences. And when you remember that we are getting a 4-to-1, and that percentage difference to the bloom is so minuscule, it's why, when graphed, there is virtually no discernible difference between the accuracy of these weapon systems. So even the Bighorn showed that it was more accurate than the G36, and that's because if you plot any one of the Bighorn's profiles, its accuracy, as in its deviation from that center line, is actually better than what the G36 is. And the Bighorn, if it had the same track over and over again, would actually have an accuracy that was on par, if not maybe a few percent better than some of the other weapon systems. But some of you might be looking at this particular sheet and looking at the glory days. 100% stability, but it looks like its bloom is more than the P416. And if you picked that up, well done to you, because that is discovery number 6. The glory days I was plotting as an oval. But what I noticed when firing it is that the Glory Days still exhibited a sideways movement despite having 100% accuracy. And the discovery is that the Glory Days is not displaying an accuracy that's worse than the P416. The accuracy is actually the exact same. The discovery is that the 100% stability of the Glory Days only applies to vertical stability. The P4 still has a displacement horizontally this much, and so what's actually occurring with the Glory Days is that it is tracking sideways an equivalent amount of that horizontal displacement, and that's why it looked like it was elliptical, but it's actually the exact same accuracy, just displaced both horizontally and vertically. This can also be seen in the FAMAS and the burnout. How is it that a weapon that is exactly the same has a different track path? Well, that's because the burnout has 40% weapon handling. Weapon handling, as we know, improves accuracy, but with the 4-to-1 return it's barely discernible. And now we know that weapon handling affects stability, but stability only affects vertical stability or vertical tracking, not horizontally. And that's why the burnout has a more pronounced left to right angle, is because it is still displacing 100% horizontally whilst only displacing 60% vertically. Which brings me to discovery number 7. And it's not really a discovery, but it bears back to what I've said at the very beginning of the video, and that is that it's raised more questions than it's answered. And that discovery is more of a realization, and that is that accuracy has very, very little to do with rounds on target. And there are many more things at play. If we take the Bighorn, for instance, clearly no one is going to tell you that the Bighorn is as accurate as any of the other weapons. And that is because when you actually plot all of the variations in its weapon profile and squeeze those into a new profile, what you get is this. The worst accuracy in inverted commas profile of any of the weapon systems, including the Chameleon. So there are definitely many more things at play than accuracy. But what we do have now is a further jumping point, another stepping stone. Because what I have now is accurate weapon profiles that are now scalable, that we know that real world physics apply to. So the CTAR. The P416. The FAMAS. The AKM. Now, with accurate weapon profiles that we know that real-world physics applies to, I can now take those weapon profiles and scale targets as they would appear in the real world to work out how many rounds would actually land on target given that weapon profile. But clearly there's more to do. A human doesn't just let the recoil take control of the weapon and let it fly off the target. There is an amount of control, and it's clear that accuracy, or the weapon's accuracy, has very little effect on actual rounds on target, and so therefore it has much more to do with the profile and how easy it is for a human in order to keep that profile within the bounds of the target. Now, I've got a lot of work to do to try and come up with a way to quantify how that occurs and the difference between the weapon systems. But I'm going to give it a crack. If you like the video, like it. If you want to see where the research goes, subscribe. But I've got to get back into the lab. So that's me, Fog, out.